All of our emotions have a message. They're incredible. They're like special messengers to us that go, this is what I got to tell you. Anger has a lot to say about your needs and your boundaries in the world. And so, if we can go, oh, this is what anger feels like for me, and I'm allowed to feel it, now I have access to the message.
Hi, Nina.
Hi, Jenny.
Welcome, everyone, to the Body Peace podcast. I know, Nina, that you have a very, very hot topic for us today. I think it's interesting for folks to know just behind the scenes, how we prepare for these
Mhm.
extraordinary episodes. And, we talk a lot about our passions. For some reason, this one is very passionate for you today. So
Mhm.
let her rip.
Okay, I want to talk about anger.
We
I
talk a
want to
lot
talk
about
about
our
anger
passions.
in
For
terms
some
of our
reason, this one is
relationship with our
very
body. I want
passionate
to
for you
talk about
today.
anger
So
and our
let her
relationship with
rip.
what a lot of women call emotional eating. And I want to talk about terms of what happens to anger, what's underneath anger, how anger actually shows up for us. I just think that it's very, very powerful to own our anger. And as women in our culture, we are often taught not to own our anger. We're taught to squelch it. And so I wanted to unpack with you, Jenny, all the power and the juiciness of anger and how it can actually be an ally for us instead of something that we have to step away from and eat to numb.
So, what's your take on why we are, as at least as females, told that in some ways directly, in some ways indirectly, that anger is not appropriate, that it's unattractive, that it is somehow not the thing for us to experience, even though, of course, we do.
Right, of course we do. And women, at least of my generation, and I'm 61. So women of my generation were taught to be good and taught to be nice, and raising your voice or expressing something very strongly in with force and with a sense of energy behind it where you're displeased with something is not acceptable because it's not people pleasing behavior, right? When we're expressing anger, we're expressing that something isn't okay with us. We're expressing sometimes a boundary or something that is morally just hits us wrong in the world. And we're saying, no, it's a very activating emotion. Anger has a lot of energy to it. And so it's powerful. That's why it's so important to own. And when I was growing up, no, that was not the way it was supposed to be. You're not supposed to be powerful. That came across as aggressive or bitchy.
Well,
No,
I mean, we all know
that was
that in the
not the way it
corporate
was supposed.
world, right?
Mhm.
A woman is bitchy, a man is aggressive, right? And
Yes.
there are many parallels like that. It's interesting to distinguish, though, I think, between anger and rage. The last thing I want is for everyone to come off of this podcast today and go to their windows and say, I'm not going to take it anymore, if you remember from that movie. And so there is a difference. Rage is really something that is almost uncontrollable. It can hurt other people in a physical way as well as emotional, it can hurt yourself. Rage is really not in one's control. Anger, like all emotions, gets expressed to the degree that you allow it to flow and that you understand what's happening and what's behind it.
Well, the difference,
Gets
right, in what you're
expressed to the
explaining
degree
is
that you
embodied
allow it to
versus
flow
out of body, right?
and that you
Rage feels out
understand
of our
what's
body. It
happening and
feels
what's
like,
behind it.
wow, like we aren't owning that feeling. Anger is a very embodied experience. It's hot. It feels hot,
Mm,
right? Versus you've got a lot of anger that hasn't been expressed, and then you've got resentment, and it feels very dull. It feels old and it
mm.
doesn't feel hot anymore. It just feels kind of heavy, right? That's what resentment feels like.
So I'm
It
sure
feels
we all
old
have
and
our
it
own
doesn't feel
stories
hot
about
anymore. It
why
just feels
we feel
kind of
anger,
heavy,
past,
right? That's
present,
what
maybe
resentment
future.
feels like.
And I think there's something called a collective anger. And I think that's worth mentioning, right? That we live in a time where There are lots of things happening globally, politically, in lots of different ways. Not that we're taking a position here, but the truth is that I think we have this I experience this accumulation on a daily basis of some combination of upset, frustration, shock, sometimes even pessimism, and underneath it all and fear, underneath
Yeah.
it all is really anger.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's sort of like the ultimate cape that takes in all of those other emotions.
Right.
All
And if we're
is
not
really anger.
letting ourselves
Because to
have
me, it's
that,
sort of like the
right?
ultimate cape
There's
that takes in
information
all
that
of
we're
those
missing, right?
other
That's the
emotions.
take home message here is that all of our emotions have a message. They're incredible. They're like special messengers to us that go, this is what I got to tell you. Anger has a lot to say about your needs and your boundaries in the world. And so if we can go, oh, this is what anger feels like for me, and I'm allowed to feel it, now I have access to the message, right? So let me say this about one of the things in the world that I'm very angry about is how women, people, are being told all the time that their body is not okay. And
Mhm.
right now, with the rise of GLP-1s, and again, I'm not saying GLP-1s are good or bad, but with the rise of GLP-1s, there are so many messages coming at us that our bodies are not okay. You're not okay if you're not taking the GLP-1s. If you are taking the GLP-1s and it's not doing what the poster says it should do or the ad says it should, then you're still not okay. And instead of us being angry that we're being sold once again this correct body that we're supposed to have, we go, oh my gosh, I'm doing it wrong, right? Instead of our anger going out, which is where it becomes impactful and useful, it gets turned in and we feel bad. And for those of us who have used food as a way to make ourselves feel better or not feel, then
Not
food becomes the backup plan.
for sure. And it's important to talk about marginalization, right? So, you know, people feel marginalized for any number of reasons, whether it's their ethnicity, their skin color, where they've come from, where they were born, their gender choice. And people are marginalized because of body size. And body size has always been sort of the last bastion of allowable marginalization. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that while there are so many people walking around saying, "Oh, thank God my food noise is gone," and great if
Mhm,
that's the experience, yes, I'm also hearing like, "Oh my god, now there's this whole new conversation out there
mhm,
that allows my body size to be compared and judged, and if not by everyone, certainly now by myself, because I'm now comparing to everything else that's happening around me because there's so much conversation about it."
yeah, it's one of the things that I ended up talking a lot in my individual sessions and in my
Mm,
groups
there's
right
so
before,
much
as we're
conversation about it.
head into the holidays, which is where we are time-wise right now, which is how do I handle the conversations around my body, around someone else's body? And again, let's notice, does it make you angry? Because right there is a need. I have a need to have a boundary. And I need to have some tools about how to set that boundary so people are not commenting about my body or somebody else's body, or the entire conversation is based on what people are eating and how much protein and what diet and what's the scale saying.
Well, as we're recording this, right, Thanksgiving just occurred, and
Mhm. Much
it's
protein
it's
and what
Monday right
diet
after
and what's the
Thanksgiving
scale
weekend, and
saying.
I'm sure that people have had a variety of experiences, that are making them angry.
Mhm.
And so, the idea is to now think about, well, how do we go into whatever other holiday gatherings are gonna take place over the next month or so, whatever
Yeah.
is your holiday. And mostly, if you're sitting at a table or at a cocktail party or you're with a bunch of people who are talking about this, you do have choices, don't you? Right? And you can stew in the anger and the upset, the frustration, the disappointment, the shame that you might even be feeling in those conversations. Or you can actually remove yourself from those conversations for a bit,
Mhm.
right? To sort of take a breather. It's hard to get an entire table to stop talking about it. Remove yourself, unless, of course, you bring up something more
Mhm.
interesting,
Yes.
which, I sort of come with a list of
Yep.
things to just, cleverly
Throw out there.
should bring up something
Yep.
more
Absolutely.
interesting.
I have my
Uh,
3 techniques, right? Defend, distract, deepen.
Deepen. Defend, distract, and deepen.
Defend, distract, deepen. Defend is the boundary. I don't want to talk about this, right? Like, let's talk about anything else.
Mhm.
Distract is, what are you watching on Netflix? Anything interesting?
Right,
And deepen is, do you know the rates for eating disorders in young women? I wish we could change the
right.
conversation so that that would shift in our
Yeah.
generation.
Now let's come back to anger for a second, right? So
Hmm.
you could be sitting in a
Conversation
holiday
so that
situation,
that
you could be
would
sitting at a meal, you
shift.
could be just, driving your car and experiencing anger either at the events of the day, something you're hearing on a podcast, heaven forbid ours, something you're hearing on the radio, something that's just been stewing and brewing. And maybe it feels uncomfortable to experience anger. What do I do with this anger? What's the point?
Hmm.
Just because I'm feeling it doesn't mean it's going to do anything. Well, let me just say this clearly: not expressing it will absolutely have an impact.
Yeah.
It will have an impact on your physical well being, and it will have an impact, perhaps, on how you manage the ways in which you want to numb that feeling.
Yeah.
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 Have an
The other
impact,
thing is
perhaps,
like how
on
to
how
do that. We've all seen the stereotypical like yell into a pillow. Honestly, it helps. Scream it when you're sitting at the red light, right? Take a tennis racket and bash your mattress
so
into
true,
a
close the
pillow,
windows.
close the windows, right? It actually is helpful to have that anger, actually, that
So true,
heat
close the windows.
move through your body with a sound, with a movement. Because what happens with all these emotions that we have, if we don't actually let them be embodied, let them move through our body, we're holding them tight. And that has an impact. And one of my personal theories is around complaining and disappointment and anger. That what happens when we don't let ourselves be, I am so furious, and I'm allowed to have these feelings that I wasn't raised, in my family, nobody was allowed to be angry, or there was one identified person who was allowed to be angry, and everybody else
The angry one.
tiptoed,
Mhm.
right? That's a dysfunctional family, alcoholic or drug addicted family, right? So if great, I'm having this big, oh, but I squash it, then where is that going to go? And where I hear it often go, when I often ask clients, is when I hear them complaining about the same thing over and over. I'm like, oh, so what's inside of that complaining?
Mhm.
I'm disappointed. Something didn't show up the way I wanted to. And what's underneath that disappointment? I'm angry.
So,
That
what I
complaining.
hear you
I'm
also say,
disappointed.
Mina,
Something
is
didn't show up
that
the way I wanted to.
there are people
And
who will
what's
say,
underneath
"Oh,
that
what's the point?
disappointment?
What is the
I'm
point of
angry.
feeling angry? It's not like anything's gonna change. It's not like I can do anything about it." Well, say, you get to decide what creative solutions you do or do not want to enact. It's
Mhm,
not like I
mhm.
but the idea is that whatever your emotions are, they're there. Whether you like it or not, they are there. And the work that it takes to
Wait,
squelch
let me say that. Let me
but
just
the idea
underline what
is
you
that
just said.
whatever your
Whether
emotions
you
are,
like
they're
it
there,
or
whether you like.
not,
Yes,
they are there. No,
yes,
no, I don't have those feelings. You do.
right,
Line what
and
you
when
just
you don't
said.
express
Whether
them,
Mhm.
your body suffers, and that's really the
Yes,
point. I've
those
heard
feelings.
countless times, "Oh, that's not my style, I'm not an angry person." We're not suggesting that you take on an identity that's called angry. We're
Mhm.
talking about a rainbow of emotions. We're
Mhm.
talking about a range. I could name 25 different emotions, and anger happens to be one of them.
Yes.
And yet it's the one that we tend to avoid the most. I think
Yep.
there are people, I would say most people are
Yeah.
afraid of their own anger.
Yeah,
afraid that it will get out of control, afraid that it will be expressed at the wrong moment, afraid that
totally.
that someone will interpret it the wrong way, especially a loved
Yeah.
one, a child, something like that,
I'll
will
say
be
something
expressed
that
at the
I
wrong
will
moment,
regret.
afraid that
That's the line,
that
right?
someone that's actually the point, that if you don't express it, actively don't express it, at some point it'll just bubble over anyway.
Mhm.
So you might as well let it out at your rate, yeah.
It either bubbles over
Actively don't
or
express
it
it,
gets
at some point
directed
it'll just bubble over anyway.
internally, and
So you
then
might
it's
as well let
I'm
it out at
bad.
your rate, yeah.
I'm wrong. I hate my body. My body betrays me every second. Oh my gosh, I can't eat like a we focus that anger inward specifically towards our body image suffers, and to our eating behavior. And then it becomes the war on food. Because it's easier often to go, I'm the problem. That's what our culture has taught many of us. I'm the problem. The problem is not the culture, but the problem, just to remind you, is the culture, is diet culture, is a whole world saying you're not okay the way you are. I'm angry
Yes,
about
and
that.
there's a whole world that's telling you you're not who you should be in a million other ways too, not even just body size, right? So
Totally.
I wanna come back to this idea of, well, alright, so if I understand that anger is inevitable, the lack of expressing it is gonna hurt me and my body and my emotions and probably my relationships, then what are the ways in which I can express that anger that give me power, that are in my
Mm.
control, that I don't become this, sort of out of control, rageful, person? One of the things that I really think people find very, very helpful, if you have access, is an entire set of dishes into a fireplace. Now, that's not really practical,
I
it's
love
hard to
that.
do, but if you can even just imagine the
Mm.
action of that,
Yeah,
sometimes that's enough to enact the emotions.
love that.
Imagine just tossing a plate into the fireplace,
Mm.
tossing another one,
Yeah.
and obviously nobody's getting hurt, tossing it into the fireplace. You can
Hmm.
almost hear the sound in your head of the
Yeah.
crashing, and with each crash, there's a thought or there's emotion, and if you actually have access, that's even better. But in the imaginary world of plates in the fireplace, it's an old Gestalt method, by the way. It's really, really very effective.
But what you're saying, it's an old
World
Gestalt
of
method, which
plates
is
in the
connected to internal
fireplace.
family
It's an old
systems, right?
Gestalt
Gestalt
method,
is
by the
the
way. It's really,
precursor,
really very
this
effective.
idea that there are parts of us, the way that internal family systems talks about there are parts of us. So you could have this part of you that is the plate crasher, right? And I loved when you were talking about it, Jenny. There was like such energy in your face. You like the sound of it and the kinetic experience of it
Mm,
and the like of it all. But we all need a good plate crasher part that's
yes.
like, this is not okay with me. And I'm going to, in my imagination, let that part of me just fly.
Yes, and another method that I think is really effective is what I like to call manual journaling. I do not mean dictating, I do not mean
Hmm.
typing, I do not mean any of those things. I mean taking a good old pen or pencil and paper and writing
Hmm.
with all of the emotion you can muster. There is something very physical, there's something very cleansing, if you will,
Hmm.
about literally writing it. It's visceral when you
Yeah.
write on the page, and you just write until you have nothing left to say.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can't say because it's you
Yeah.
writing it, and you can do with it whatever you wish. You can publish it, you can shred it, you can burn it, I don't care.
Yeah.
Just do it safely. The idea is that it's a visceral experience. There's a
Yeah.
physicality attached to anger. And when we don't express our anger, that physicality comes snapping back at us. And that's
Yeah.
actually, I think, the big point here.
Absolutely. I call that rage writing just
Mm.
because it sounds good, but it is anger writing, right? That rage writing, like letting it go. And the other thing that's connected to that technique is non dominant handwriting.
Ah, yes.
So years ago, I did a lot of inner child work on myself. And so I was constantly with crayons. I'm right handed with my left hand, non dominant, and letting that side express. So if it's hard for you, for your logical brain to be like, I am angry about this, I'm angry about this, Pick up that pen or marker or crayon, even better, with your non dominant hand. Get a nice big piece of paper because it's not going to come out nice and tidy and controlled. That doesn't happen with your non dominant hand. So it allows for a freer expression. And it might just be colors, it might not be.
Yes, for sure. You also talked about parts of us. There are parts that are present and there are parts that are past. And often I hear from clients that I work with, well, okay, so big shot. What am I supposed to do with I let them call me that. What am I supposed to do with anger that's directed at someone who had the temerity to die, who's not
Mhm.
here anymore? I can
Mhm.
scream from here to tomorrow. They're not going to hear me. I'm not so sure they're not going to hear you, but that's another story. Okay, but they're not going to hear
Mhm.
me. It's important to
Mhm.
actually have that conversation anyway, whether that's in a therapeutic setting where you can actually, imagine speaking to that person now as an adult
Yeah.
or as whenever you had an incident with them, whether it's writing them a letter. It doesn't matter whether or not they'll ever get it. It's just writing that letter. Here are the things I've been wanting to say. You may not hear anything back. I'm leaving doubt here, but you may not hear anything back, but you still get to express it all. At some
Yeah.
point, and this is a hard point to make here, um, there is a way in which we want to let the anger go until the next time you feel it, right? But you want to be able to let the anger go and leave your body somehow in a state of peace. And so some of that requires expressing it in the most physical ways you can and then being kind to that body, whether it's through deep breathing or meditation, if that's your thing, just taking a lovely walk in nature for 15 minutes. That's all it takes,
Yeah.
just to then cool the system down a bit. It's
I
your
love
thing,
those words,
just
right?
taking a
Cool
lovely
the
walk
system
in
down
nature for 15
because
minutes. That's all
anger,
it
it's one of
takes,
the ways you'll know it's
just to
angry.
then cool the
It's
system
anger,
down a bit.
right? That flush of heat. And when we really let it come out and let ourselves express it, we're going to have warmth in our body. And so giving yourself that space to cool down is so important. It's also really important when we're exploring anger to look at what did it look like growing up? What were the models of anger that I
Mm.
had, right? Because was anger complete in my house? My dad was the only person who was allowed to be angry, and it was out of control. And so I grew up, no, not doing that. Definitely not doing anger because to me, that's what anger looked like is being out of control.
I don't know if you
That
know this,
no,
but it's a
not doing
requirement
that.
to be a
Definitely
therapist. You have
not
to have
doing anger
angry
because,
fathers.
oh gosh,
So
it
either
feels
that
like
or
that
either that or
sometimes.
you and I were living in the same house. I'm not sure, but yes, okay.
One or the other.
Right, okay.
So it's important, whether you saw your mother, right? Oh, she's angry. And then she locked herself in her room. Or you saw a sibling or an aunt or an uncle or whoever in your growing up years take out their anger with a bottle of alcohol or sit down with a whole cake. Whatever it is, what did you see? It's so important because that's how we learned how to do feelings by the people around us.
I think that's a critical point, and it's a hopeful point because it
Mhm.
means that we're constantly learning beings, and we can learn different ways, as we
Mhm.
evolve. We hope we evolve.
We
It
do
means that
evolve.
I also wanna say that it's been my experience, through these more years than I'd like to remember that I've been practicing, that, um, anger and fear seem to be most often 2 sides of a hand that sort of travel together most often. And I say that because, sometimes when we are experiencing fear, yes, it could be because there's something obviously threatening us in the moment, right? But sometimes the fear is also hidden by anger or anger's hidden by fear. And
Mhm.
so I ask you to just consider that these 2 sort of travel together and they both have the right to be expressed. Neither one needs to be suppressed unless, there's a safety issue
Well, let's play it
together,
out,
and they
Jenny,
both
because I
have the
love
right
that
to
point.
be
So let's
expressed.
play it out,
Neither
right?
one
I'm very
needs to be
angry at our
suppressed
diet culture.
unless,
I'm
there's
very
a safety
angry
issue.
at the rise of idealizing thinness. So if we look at, okay, so what's the fear in there? The fear is that women will be oppressed by sizeism forevermore, and we will have less power than we do inherently in our culture because we diminish ourselves both by pressure to be small and by a feeling like we're not good enough. And so I am afraid,
I'll give you another
diminish
example of that.
ourselves
I
both by
have a
pressure to be
fear
small and by a feeling
that
like we're
it will
not good
not be in
enough.
my
And so
lifetime
I am
that we will
afraid.
get to experience, let's say, a female president of the United States.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that doesn't mean we won't have some wonderful and excellent presidents in the balance of my lifetime, but I have a fear that there won't be women, and that fear makes me angry because
Yeah.
by now we should have been on number 5, but okay, we haven't had one yet, and my fear is that for every cycle that continues where we don't have one, or at least, you know, the idea of one, um, women really do still suffer oppression. It's evident in the, disparity in earning capacity and in so many other ways. Obviously, I'm very angry about the abortion laws that have changed, and I fear that that will ultimately create the demise of some young women. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
needless to say. Yeah.
And let's bring it to the really personal,
Will
right? Because I hear a lot of
ultimately
women angry with
create
their
the
body.
demise of
My
some
body
young
isn't
women. I mean,
losing
that's
weight. My body is not getting smaller, right? What's the fear? If my body doesn't become smaller,
mhm.
then I won't get the approval. I won't get all the good things that are supposed to happen to us when we are in a small body. And some of them are true because we've got thin privilege in our culture and people treat people with smaller bodies better. So it's founded on reality.
And
Are
there's
true
another
because we've
side
got
of
thin.
that too,
Mhm.
and the fear is that if my body isn't a particular size or a particular look, that I will get sick. 'Cause I have
Mhm.
been told that
Mhm.
body size is the main determinant of whether I will live longer, whether I
Mhm.
will suffer certain
Yes.
diseases, and sorry, but it's just not true. And,
Right.
this is the hardest part of the work we do. I'm sure you
Yes.
agree, Nina. It's very hard for people to understand this. What do you mean? If I'm 50 pounds heavier, what do you mean my health isn't at risk? No, your health is at risk if you're not moving that body. Your health is at risk depending on what your genetics are. Your health is at risk if you don't get enough sleep on a chronic basis, she says to herself. Your health is your health is at risk if you really have sleep on a high blood levels of certain, in certain ways that are just not okay. That's
Yeah.
when you're at risk. None of that has anything to do with body size. There
Right.
are very, very thin people walking the planet, and you might look at them and say, "Oh, see, if I could just be that." Little do you know that
Right.
many of them, and I'm sorry to say this, are walking time bombs because the whole world thinks they're healthy, and they're actually underserved, and they're walking around with very high blood pressure, very high cholesterol, but you wouldn't think that. They're a thin person. That's the point. It has nothing to do with body size. There are people in what we might call larger bodies who are running marathons 5 times a year.
Yep.
So it doesn't hold. I've never thought that it held, and it adds to the fear and anger. If my body is a certain size, I will be putting my health at risk. No,
Right.
I dare say the thoughts about it are what put your health at risk,
Right. The stress of the thoughts, right? I've had many clients, I will be like my mother, I will get diabetes,
what put your
right?
health at risk.
So there's this added stress, right, that goes with the fear.
I'm glad you said diabetes because, I mean, as long as we're wrapping all of this into this conversation,
Mhm.
um, again, with this idea of fear and anger, I am hearing all the time now, and I think it's more because of the proliferation of GLP-1s, again, use them if you like, that I'm even hearing from parents who say, I'm just so afraid my child's gonna get diabetes, we have to take the weight off. And I have to say to them, well, had their blood sugar checked.
Mhm.
I mean, it's such a basic question.
Yeah.
Have you had their A1C checked, right? And by
Mhm.
the way, would you be checking it if they were in a thinner body? And
Right.
it's a very, it's a disclosing conversation, as you can imagine.
Then we get into this
And
whole
by the way,
thing
would you
about
be
the
checking it if
fear-mongering
they
of our
were in a thinner
culture, and
body?
what are we
And
s
it's a
what
very,
is the
it's a
fear-mongering
disclosing
selling
conversation, as you can
to
imagine.
us, right? Are they right now selling GLP-1s because we should be very afraid of our bodies because we can't trust our bodies? Are they selling, you know, whatever else, some new diet, some new way, some, 5 million gram protein drink because we're not having enough protein? Like, there's a lot of fear that is fueling this sense of you're not doing it right. And it's so important to sort of dial into yourself and go, wait, how do I feel about this? I feel angry, and that's a boundary. And so, how do I want to set that boundary? Maybe I want to start unsubscribing to certain things on Instagram or Facebook so that less of that
Mhm.
chatter, fear-based chatter is coming at me. And that's the power. That's where I want to reel back to the power of owning our anger,
Mhm.
the power of saying, yes, I'm angry. This is what I'm angry about. What do I need? Because our anger speaks to us in a lot of heat, but inside is that message, I have a need here.
So let's
Because our
talk about
anger
some concrete
speaks to
things
us
to round this out,
in
right?
a
So
lot
you
of
talked about
heat, but
social media.
inside is that message,
Our social
I
media,
have a
whether we
need
like it or
here.
not, is sort of curated by an algorithm. But we have the ability to start to curate our own algorithm. And what I mean by that is if there are ads coming in to your feed, it doesn't matter why they're coming. It doesn't matter whether it was something you ever clicked. It doesn't matter. Click on hide ad. And when it asks you why, say irrelevant or say whatever it is you want to say so that that ad will never show up again. And what happens is when you do that, less ads like that will come into your feed. That's not to say that just not seeing ads will have you not think about it. The point is that it's sort of like a death by a thousand cuts. Why expose yourself to the things that are so irritating all the
Yeah.
time? And the second thing I would say is not to be afraid of your anger. No, you don't want
Mm,
to hurt yourself. No, you don't want to hurt another being ever under any circumstance. But the idea is to be in touch with it and say, you know what? There must be a
mm.
reason why I'm feeling this. There must be
Yes.
multiple reasons. And so let me figure out a way to express it rather than a way to suppress it. Let me express it and not suppress it.
Yes.
To me, that's the takeaway here today. In whatever ways that you can.
Yeah. And it might be as simple as, I'm angry. I am angry. Just stating it and see if you can feel into it. Just start there.
Did you ever see the movie Pretty Woman?
Yes.
Yeah, so Richard Gere at some
And
point
see if you can
says to
feel
Julia
in.
Roberts, I am angry. I am angry. I have spent 12 years in therapy and lots of money to be able to speak that sentence. I am angry. So we're just trying to save you time and money here. That's actually just express it, whenever you can. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very funny the way he says it, but we
it
get the
is.
point. Yeah.
Jenny, thank you for talking about anger because I
Do you
really
feel
wanted to.
better?
I do. I
Yeah,
do. I feel
it's
a
very
lot
funny the
better.
way he
I was
says it,
so
but
angry
we
about
we get
everything. I was like,
yeah.
we have to talk about this,
Well, this is the
talking
point. I mean,
about anger
unless you
because
think that
I
there's
really
something
wanted to.
scientific about how
I
we come up
do.
with
I
our
do. I feel
subjects,
a lot
we
better.
got
I
on
was
with each
so
other
angry
today,
about
and
everything. I
Nina
was like, we
said,
have to talk about
"Really
this.
angry." I'm like, "Okay, what's the title?" I mean, there it is, because that's what's present, and we
Mhm.
are the barometer of everything around us. And so, if talking about it made you feel better, that's a takeaway. If there are other ways you heard today that really help you all, express your anger, please express, don't suppress. And for God's sake, don't hurt yourself or anyone else in the process. Anger can be power.
Yes. Thanks,
Thanks,
Jenny.
Nina. Great to see you. Hurt yourself or anyone else in the process. Anger can be power.
Yes. Thanks,
Thanks,
Jenny.
Nina. Great to see you.